Hi, welcome to DrumWise Meets, and today I'm here with Ash Soan. Hi Ash.
How you doing?
What age did you get into drums, and what bands or artists inspired you?
Okay. Well, I really got into it when I was 10 years old. My dad played me a record, an actual record, back in the day, and it was called "Let There Be Drums" by Sandy Nelson.
Mm.
And I there's no other musicians in the family. There's music around, but I'd never heard the sound. I it was just struck me. I mean, it was a brilliant sound to me, and I just thought I want to do that. And I bugged them for about a year, and eventually they bought me a little Premiere kit, and that was that really. So 10 years old onwards, and I'm 52 this year, and I'm still doing it.
Awesome. And talk to us more about the Premiere kit. Can you remember like the colour and things like
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, it was single-headed toms, a Premier Olympic, and it's called satin gold. The finish. Yeah, mega.
Awesome.
With a little, steel, their standard steel snare, and I think I had some Zins, which I wish I still had actually. Hi hats and a crash and a ride. Yeah, it was brilliant. And they let me. You were talking earlier about the fact you're a parent, so am I, and thinking about putting a drum kit in a 10-year-old's bedroom and let them just willy-nilly play whenever you like, which is what they did, is pretty spectacular, really. Now, bless them. Both my parents have gone on. I lost my dad last year, incredible. Sort of support, and here I am. Yeah.
And normally I follow that up with, do you still have the kit? I know you said you don't have the cymbals. Do you have the
No, I don't have the kit. I part X'd it, I think, I can't even remember what it was after that. I think the next kit that I truly remember was I bought a Tama Grand Star because of basically Phil Gould from 1142 and a couple, and Stuart Copeland was a Tama endorsee, and I loved both of those guys and still do. And it was back in the sort of 80s, so there was the rack thing was just coming in, and Tama had made this brilliant rack. That was my next kit, but that I don't know where that Premiere is. It'd be knocking around somewhere. Amazing. It was such a brilliant. I used to love it. The sort of smell, like when you get drums and you open them up for the first time and put a new head on, I can sort of still smell that kit. It's so weird.
It's funny you should say that. The other day I had a student and I was showing them how to change the heads on a tom, because I've got a new tom for my kit over there, and I think they thought I was insane. I took the head off and I was like, smell it, go on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And like, I guess if you've got a bit of an aficionado at drum smells, you could blindfold somebody. But because if you think about Gretsch, for instance, they spray the inside. It's that silver paint that they use, and I guess all of this stuff, contributes to the sort of aroma of the drum.
Now, while we're talking about equipment, I normally say to people at this point, so what equipment do you currently use? But I think I might change that slightly for you, because obviously we talked off camera about, people asking you a lot about equipment and things these days. Yeah. Maybe could you talk to us about your studio and how the room came about? Because obviously it's a really interesting room, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Essentially, my wife and I moved from London when we decided to have some children, and my wife's from Norfolk, so we this was just a natural place to move up to in Norfolk, and we wanted a place with a little bit of land. We wanted some outbuildings for potentially in the future a studio for myself, and we've still got some outbuildings next to the house, but when we started looking into converting those barns, it was a lot of money, like over £200,000, and we just moved up, and it was like, okay, well, certainly we're not going to stick that on the mortgage. We've got a new mortgage and children, and it's like, I'm not going to take that just yet. And at the time, a friend of ours said, "Oh, what about the mill?" So there were the remains, total sort of run-down remains of a windmill that was in the field, and where we live in the workers would have lived in our house, and all there were really 4 big brick supports that would have supported the wooden structure, and then a footing, and there's a tree growing probably where that kit is there. There's a elm tree, quite a big elm tree growing there, and I never thought anything of it really. It's like this, that was the old windmill. Yeah, what's that over there? That's interesting. And a friend of ours basically specializes in green builds, and he just said, "What about the mill?" And I'm like, "Well, what about it? There's nothing really left of it." He said, "Well, we could put straw bales and try and keep it close to what it would look like, with the cedar shingles. So the roof has got like cedar tiles on it, which is kind of what they would have used back in the day." And it came in considerably less money than converting the barns. So we just went for it. And also my wife was like, you got to get all your stuff out of the house or I'm going to leave you. So, I like all of us, just paraphernalia, snare drums, kits, discs, just everything. And it's like, get it out of the house. And really, so the initial thought was, it's going to be somewhere for me to practice and somewhere to store all my rubbish. And then a producer said to me one day, "What does it sound like?" And I'm like, well, it sounds pretty cool in the room. He's like, "Stick one mic up, record it and send it to me," which I did. And he said, "You know what? The room sounds pretty cool." I said, "Yeah, it is." He said, "Okay, well, you've got a couple of options. You slowly start buying a little bit of gear and get into it slowly, or you jump in." And I decided to jump straight in, and I spent quite a bit of money on some initial gear. And this was, well, the mill is now, it's 10 years next year, actually, that it's been around.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, yeah, the whole journey that a lot of people now know started,
Excellent. Oh, thanks for that. That's great. And I feel your pain with that. When we moved here, this is a double garage, which is an outbuilding. And when we first moved in, all of because we had to move the drum school as well, so all of my stuff, my personal kits, the drum school stuff, was stacked up in the kitchen, and my wife's like cooking around it, and she's like, "That has got to get out of the house." So we built this and like soundproofed it all in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And you still got a wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Yeah, good.
So, on to a couple of questions that people have found tough recently, but yeah. I don't want to make your life easy, Ash. So, first of those questions, if you had to pick just one, who would be your all-time favorite drummer?
Wow, that is a toughie, isn't it? Oh God, there's so many. I mean, that's a nightmare, that one. I'm going to say Gad.
Okay.
If I really, really had to sort of pin it down, I suppose. Yeah.
And what's the reason behind that?
Well, just he sort of covers a lot of all the other drummers that I like, and does a similar, can do some of the things that the other drummers that I really like. And there's no question about it. He's got one of the greatest feels the world has ever heard. So yeah, Gad, I guess.
And if I made it a bit easier and said, now give us some other inspirations, because I mean that's a real. I would struggle to answer that. So I feel
it's hard, because like I adore Stuart Copeland. And if you think about Stuart and Gad, they're very, very, very different drummers, and I love them I can't say equally now because I've just chosen Gad. But Stuart, you know, I love his energy and the sound, and just his sort of brilliant kind of left field approach to playing the drums. And I love, of course, I love Picaro and Garibaldi, you know, Purdy, obviously, you know, and of course Steve Jordan, all the groovers really, you know, um,
Cool.
so many great drummers that are still around and still sounding absolutely brilliant. I mean, Garibaldi is an absolute inspiration. You know, I think he's 72, David, and I went to see him a couple of years ago at the Albert Hall. Just so good. I'm like, I do hope I'm all right, you know, anywhere near that in 20 years' time, basically, which is unbelievable.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah.
And that's why I came up with that question, because I thought when I was doing all these, I thought I'm going to ask everybody the same questions, really, you know, apart from, you know, certain things about studios and so on. But I'm going to ask the same questions to everyone, because then I'm going to get all these different answers. And I thought, well, who would my favourite drummer be? I wouldn't be able to pick just one. So it's great to ask you. But we do draw on lots of different influences as we get older and as we develop as players, don't we? So
That's right. Yeah.
you know,
I mean, I could go on and on and on and on talking about drummers. You know, another bunch of names have come into my head, and it's like, of course, Omar Hakim. You know, I went through an enormous Omar phase. That's all the only drummer I listened to for ages. You know, like we do. You know, you get into a little vibe with yourself, and you kind of that little growth spurt, as it were, as a musician, will be influenced by one or two drummers for that little bit, and then you often you start. I think what happens is that people go, oh god, there's that thing, you know, but where did that drummer get that from? Oh, he was influenced by, and then you go back and you check out the dude that he was checking out. That often happens, I think. It's quite interesting. I was talking to one of the guys at Vic Firth, and they said, you know, some of the younger drummers, believe it or not, don't know who Steve Gadd is. There are some guys that don't know, you know, and that's kind of fair enough, I guess. You know, when you're young and you're starting playing, Steve now, I guess, wouldn't be a name that would come up straight away. But what's interesting, what the drummer, the person at Vic Firth was saying, but someone like me talking about Steve, because there's a much better chance they're going to find me before they find Steve now in this world that we live in with social media and stuff. But I will then nudge him that way, and he said it's great that is happening. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree.
I feel like it's my job as well as an educator to you know, to show these younger guys, people like Steve Gadd. You know, if we come up against something, I say, right, what do you want to do in your lesson? Oh, I'm not really sure. Right, check out this guy. You know, and then give them a back catalogue of stuff and try and work on some grooves. Yeah, because it's so important, isn't it, as a player to know all these different people.
Absolutely, and it never stops. You know, I mean, I haven't, you know, we haven't even got into the more pop drummers that I adore as well. You know, which is another thing in my life where I was like, okay, songs. You know, and Steve obviously ticks that box. But you know, Steve Ferroni is one of, again, another favorite of mine. And you know, the magic thing about Steve is his groove is outrageous and still is. But he also has got those drum things that make you go, oh God, that's so killer when he does that, you know. And it's a drummer's kind of taste. But if you go back to the records that Steve played on, he's doing that stuff, and you can hear it on, you know, like Shaka Khan records or whatever. You know, it's amazing. So there's so many more of those drummers too that are out there. It's just endless, you know.
And just a shameless plug here, if you're watching this, that I did one of these interviews with Steve Ferroni, and he talks about recording Earth Song with Michael Jackson and things like that, and the fact that Michael Jackson wanted it to all be programmed drums, and he was like, no, I'm going to record the drums for this, and you're going to listen to it, and you're going to like it. And I was just like, oh, that story, that's just amazing. And then what a drum track he's come up with, you know.
Yeah, he's a formidable character, Steve. And it's interesting. One of my things that I try and sort of get across to younger drummers is character in your playing, like an actual personality, which we of course have all got. But sometimes, you know, when you get snowed under with all of the stuff to learn and all of the different styles and all the different feels, all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't tell who you are, you know. So a big one for me is to try and sort of make sure that young drummers still try and find an identity, you know, because, you know, I think Steve, within seconds of him playing, I'd know it was him. And obviously Stuart Copeland and Gad, all of the greats have got a thing, and you just go, oh, that's and it can be tricky to find that voice, you know. I'm still looking for it too, you know, and I think you copy those drummers that you really like, and then hopefully eventually you start sounding like yourself doing that thing, you know.
Yeah, awesome. Now, the second question, which a few people have found tough here, what's been the highlight of your career so far?
Wow. Well, I guess, you know, highlights, they can be many different things. It could be a musical highlight or a, you know, a playing highlight. I don't know, I've had a few. Am I just allowed one?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, no, I can open it up and you can have a few. But the obvious answer, Ash, is of course doing DrumWise Meets right now.
That's definitely up there. You know, I mean, it's tough. It's tough with that.
Go with a few. It's fine.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. The band that I play in and played in when I first my first big break was a Scottish band called Delamitri, sort of pop rock band, and we've got a new record out, by the way, which did all right for some oldies. But we supported the Stones when I was 24, and that was quite a thing, you know. I'd only been in the band like about a year, and we played Woodstock, which was also a massive deal for me. And also we supported Stones and Bryan Adams, and I think the Stones it was just I was just young and ready to be like, I was starting my journey, and straight away we're on the same bill as one of the greatest rock and roll bands ever, you know. And I didn't meet Charlie until later. I did meet Ronnie, but Ronnie's the only person I saw. I saw him down the corridor. Charlie, I'd never met him, sadly, until after I met him on the street, actually, in London, which is a funny story because I was walking up to South Kensington, and it's very quiet, not many people around, and then there's this guy walking across, really immaculately dressed with a like suit and tie and everything. But, oh my God, it's Charlie Watts. And I'm like, I'll just let him walk past me and go, and that's it. Arguably, should we or shouldn't we say anything, you know? And you're sort of conditioned when you start playing with famous people to sort of keep yourself to yourself and not stick your head above the parapet. And I almost let him go, and then in the end I sort of went, Charlie. And he went, yeah. And he turned around, came over to me and shook my hand, and he said, do you play drums? I said, yeah. I said, look, I don't expect you to remember, but I was in this band and we supported you. And he's like, was it good? I was like, yeah, it was really, really good, you know. And he said, what's the name of your band then? I said, oh, we're called Delamitri. And he went, yeah, you're right, I don't remember. Lovely. And he was smiling, obviously taking the piss completely. And it just really dry, brilliant sense of humor. And then we just got chatting about Andy Newmark, actually, is another drummer that lives in the UK. He's from Bermuda, Andy. And I know that he was a good mate of Charlie's, is a good mate of Charlie's. And we just started talking about Andy. But it was great, a lovely sort of chance meeting like that. But I guess the Stones, Woodstock, the Olympics was pretty spectacular. The whole sort of journey of that, the opening ceremony. I guess there's some records that are important. You know, like when I did the Adele record, that was at the time. She was quite famous because she had 19 was out, and I was working for the producer called Fraser T. Smith, and quite a lot of producers still now. I've got a session on Monday, and I don't know who it's for, the artist, but the producer said, you know, Monday rack, and I don't know who it is. And with Dale, the same thing happened. Fraser just said to me, you know, what are you doing Thursday night or whatever. So I went down to his studio, which was at the time was in Farm Lane in Fulham. And he had a little kit there, and I used to bring my snare and my cymbals. And I, you know, I got on my cab and went over there and and I walked through the door, and there she is, just sat on a stool looking at her phone. I was like, oh, okay, it's her, you know. And she was lovely. She was really involved in the whole process of recording. So that was a good one. And in fact, I joked with Fraser afterwards. We'd finished it. She'd got a cab, I think, and left, and we were just having a beer because it'd gone well, the session. And I just went, oh, see you at the Grammys. Ha, 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 ha. And then about 6 months later, Fraser called me and said, do you want to come to the Grammys? I was like, are you joking? He went, she's up for 6. so that was that. And I went out to the Grammys, and I was playing in Los Angeles. So the Grammys were at the weekend, and then the following Friday, I was doing a gig with Sinead O'Connor at the El Rey Theatre in Los Angeles. And I had a call from Trevor Horn saying, oh, can you do a session that particular week? And I said, oh, I can't. I'm in LA. Sorry, Trevor. And he said, oh, let's do it there. so I ended this is probably, looking back, it's the most mental week of my entire musical life. You know, seeing Adele lift 6 Grammys, and then I think by the Wednesday or Thursday I was recording with Seal at Trevor's studio in LA, and then I had a gig with Sinead O'Connor, and then flew home that following weekend. Yeah, straight back to the farm and looking after the pigs.
That's some really good highlights right there. Nice.
Cool.
Excellent. Now, from career highlights to more interesting, like, negative side of things, but like funny stories. Have you ever had anything go wrong on stage that you can tell us about? Whether it's gear fails, brain fails, or it could be studio, you know, fails as well.
Yeah, definitely. After I was in Delamitri and I left around sort of 97, and I very quickly joined a band called Faithless. And I remember it was one of the early gigs. We were on stage, and I just did that thing where I glanced down at the set list, and I jumped forward, and I counted the wrong song in.
Oh.
And everybody's looking at me going, it's not that one. Because they I guess they knew from the tempo, most of them. It's not that. And I started counting them in and started playing. And a couple of people, it was a bit of a train wreck, I recall, because a couple of people joined me and we're like, okay, we started, so let's play that tune. And then others were just like, it's not that tune. So that was a bit of a sort of early on disaster with Faithless. I've fallen off the back of a riser before now. That was quite good. Not for me, but for the rest of them.
I've done that too. I know how that feels.
Yeah, it's horrible. Also, I've had a guitar player for Delamitri would do this thing where he would lean back with his Les Paul and lean back onto my sort of floor toms, and they'd start moving, and it'd be quite unnerving. Like and he did indeed lose his footing at one point and took the whole one side of my drums out. Luckily, I was carried on playing. I'm just laughing at him on the floor, and you know, sort of Spinal Tap, a couple of roadies trying to stand him up and all that. Yeah, but really and truly, nothing totally awful. if I'm honest. I mean, I've been quite lucky. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any more, because it's good to know that people make mistakes. I was on tour once, and I'd been out the night before, and I'd had a few drinks, and I fell up the stairs going to my hotel room. I just sort of slipped going up weirdly. Now, I didn't sort of fall back or anything, but I just my foot sort of caught the step in a really weird way. Anyway, I was then woken up at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with enormous pain in my right foot ankle, and I looked at it and it was massively swollen, and I basically thought I'd bust it. And I basically called the tour manager, which he didn't like at that time in the morning. And in America, you know, it's expensive. Health, obviously, health care is a different thing to it is here. And so an X-ray, a steroid injection, a pair of crutches later, and I had a gig that evening. And I think I had 2 gigs left on the tour, and I did that gig with a massive bandage all around my ankle and less bass drum notes for that entire show. And then afterwards, just straight in the ice, foot up, and off to the next gig. Slightly embarrassing. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, as you said, I think it is really good for people to know that, you know, even the pros make mistakes, you know.
Oh, there's no. I mean, you know, some people would argue, you know, if you don't make mistakes, you never actually move on. You know.
Yeah.
Which I think is totally right. I think you know, you've got to mess up, you know, because that's when you learn good lessons.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, this next one, I think is a really good question for you, actually, because obviously you do a lot of sessions and a lot of recording. When you first get a gig with a new artist, or maybe, you know, a track that you're going to record. So you know, you mentioned the Adele one, or going to a studio when you don't really know what it is that you're going to be recording.
Yeah.
How do you figure out what you've got to play? How do you learn the song, really?
Yeah. Well, I would always, and I always do, sketch out the form. And then when I did the voice, I couldn't really read very well at the beginning of my voice time, and I was on the voice for 7 years, and by the end my reading got quite good. But all of us have got the capability of writing out in our own sort of hieroglyphics the form of the song. So on a session like the session on Monday, I don't know who it's for. I know where it is. That's about it. I'll turn up and I'll go in, and then the first thing the producer will go, "This is it," and they'll play the demo with the demo drums, and I'll just immediately sketch out the form. That's the first thing I'll write out: intro, verse, chorus, blah 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 blah. Then I'll ask them to play it again, and then I'll go in on a little bit more detail. If there's any stops, if there's any syncopation that's going with the arrangement, you know, any hits or anything like that. And also I'll talk to the producer about the beat, you know, what the actual part is. Do they want it to be that part? Is it specific, that bass drum pattern? And if it is, I'll then write that bass drum pattern in. And of course that bass drum pattern might change in certain places. And I'll slowly but surely build that chart up. So I'm looking at it and go, okay, that's enough information for me to be able to do a take. And then we go in, and first one, second one, third one, and you never know.
Yeah.
15th one. Yeah.
Now, a couple of curveball questions for you, Ash. And the first one of those is, what are your hobbies away from drums and music?
Yeah. Well, I think a few people know that I quite like cars. I've been very lucky to have owned some Porsches in my life, and the one that I have at the moment is the last of the air-cooled 911s. So 911s from 1964 to present day, but but the engine was like air cooled, like a Beetle, up till 1998. So the car that I've got is 1997, and then they went water cooled engines, because they had to, for a few reasons. But the aficionados were like, no, you can't do it. You can't. And a 911 has to be air cooled. It sounds a certain way. That's actually the most significant difference, is the way the engine sounds, and the performance in some respects. So I'm really into them, and I've got an old Land Rover. I just kind of like tinkering about with motors, and both of these cars are sort of analog, I guess you would call it. You can actually see the engine. You can, if you are of that way inclined, you can do stuff to them. Certainly, the Land Rover, you can do pretty much everything. The 911, I'll do a few bits, but I won't get right in there because I want someone that knows what they're doing to do it. So I really like that. I live in the countryside, and I've always actually been into sort of natural history. And I remember when I first moved to London, I grew up in Shropshire. And when I moved to London, I remember I was on a gig with some great musicians who are still mates of mine, and they'd grown up in London. And I said, "Oh, do you hear that blue tits? That's a blue tits alarm call." And they looked at me like I was from out of space. Like, what are you talking about? That bird is making an alarm call, so there must be a cat or something. And they're like, "How do you know that?" I was like, "I just know," And so bird song and bird calls and stuff, I know them. It's really weird, and around where we live, it's incredible. And actually, there's nightjars. If there's any twitches out there watching this, there's nightjars in Norfolk this time of year. So, and that's got an amazing sound. That right. It almost sounds electronic, that bird, but it comes up from Africa and nests here. Absolutely brilliant. And apparently there's turtle doves in that same place, so I might go down there a bit later. So yeah,
cool. Yeah. Excellent.
There's I'm not just I don't just do Instagram videos.
The most anticipated question of this whole interview series is this one, Ash. So what's your favorite biscuit?
Wow. I'll tell you what I really like. I like those Tunnocks wafers.
The sort of rectangular ones, yeah.
Is that allowed? Is that technically a biscuit or not? No.
I don't know. Is it? I mean, people have said it before, so.
Yeah. Oh, have they? Okay. Yeah. Well, that or the Tunnocks, the marshmallow one. Love those.
Yeah.
Or if it has to be a biscuit, probably chocolate-covered malted milks.
Hang on. Whoa. I literally didn't know they existed. Chocolate-covered malted milks?
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, yeah. That's a revelation. That no one said that. We've had malted milks. People have said malted milks.
Well, unless my wife's getting a particular brand that I haven't, but they are definitely, they might be an own brand for someone, but they've got chocolate on them. Wow. And it is that thing that we like about malted milks. Yeah.
Ah, awesome. And so with any of those biscuits or caramel wafers or whatever they are, would you dunk them?
No question.
Yeah.
Absolutely every time.
All three, including the marshmallow tea cake?
No, that wouldn't get dunked.
I mean, that's dangerous.
But it would be in the mouth and very, very quickly some tea to sort of, seal that flavour.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, for you these days, probably one of those tea cakes is quite a messy affair, isn't it?
It is with this. I have to pull it out of the way, the old tash. Yeah.
So on to my final question. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, so when you first started playing or when you first started taking drums seriously, what would that advice be?
Wow. I think it would be, don't get worried about not keeping up with the Joneses, if you know what I mean. Like, for instance, I had a whole period of my sort of early days when I moved down to London when I was 21. But and before that, I guess as well, I had sort of not anxiety, but I was like, oh, I can't play like him, and I can't do it like him. I just can't do it like him. And I just didn't feel it like him, said drummer. And then one day I realized, oh, hang on, but I do it like this, and actually that's all right. In fact, that it's better in some respects. And the day that I realized that I had a perspective on playing was when it completely changed, absolutely completely changed for me. So I do say to young drummers, don't get snowed under by trying to be someone. It's good to be influenced by them. It really is, to properly go down the rabbit hole with a particular drummer and learn every single lick that they do and buy their signature snare and sticks, and it's brilliant. That's how you grow. But one of the negative sides is getting to the point where you are so not obsessed, but so seriously into sounding and being like that person that you might not, well, you'll never be like them completely, but their approach is their approach. And I think, it's good to try and find your own voice as soon as you can, really. Or at least thinking about it, like, okay, how do I play? How do I feel the pulse? And honestly, when I discovered that, okay, well, I'll tell you a story. Basically, I used to dep for a very famous British drummer with an equally famous artist that he worked with, and this drummer was the Don, still is actually, and I used to go into that gig when I dep for him and try and play it just like him. And I watched him play the gig countless times. I've got all the live cassettes, and I just, there was a couple of songs in particular, I just couldn't feel it like he felt it. And it was so frustrating. And inevitably, the gig would always be good, but would be like, oh yeah, he's good, that Ash kid, but he's not. And one day I got so frustrated about trying to play this pocket like this other drummer. I just went, you know what? I am going to play it how I feel it. And I just, because I'd had enough of like, just at the end of that song being unsatisfied about my performance, because I was completely chasing my tail continually. The tempo, the feel, everything. And I just one day I just thought, well, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to play it how I would play it. It can't be less of a disaster than it is every other time I bloody play this tune. So I did it, and immediately the artist that I was playing with was like, and it went a different route to what they were used to playing, but they enjoyed where it went. And then from that moment on, I was like, okay, there's something in this thing about being centered and about being yourself. So sorry, it's a big long-winded answer, but those are the things that I would say to my young self, and I do say to young drummers, and I am saying now.
No, that's great. Good stuff. Cool. That's a great answer. So, Ash, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It really has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for asking me. And I know we had a few dates that didn't work out and but I'm really happy that we've managed to do it.